Riddle. A puzzle, hence a trick, dark saying, sentence, enigma, mystery, secret, hard question, proverb. A question or statement so framed as to exercise one's ingenuity in answering it or discovering its meaning. Conundrum. Someone or something that is difficult to understand or explain. A riddle is a statement or question or phrase having a double or veiled meaning put forth as a puzzle to be solved. It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter.
Samson's riddle is so beautiful and so enlightening. The question is, how do I prove that as the lion was dead, that the blood is alive? How can I prove this? Well, it's very interesting to note. Ron White and this man of God had a supernatural experience with God, and that the Holy Ghost came upon him on his way walking towards Golgotha. As Ron was walking down that escarpment in Jerusalem at Golgotha, he was talking to a Jewish man that was in control of that place of antiquity. And his left hand points out, and he says, that's Jeremiah's grotto and the Ark of the Covenant's in there. And he's like, he didn't know if that was from God or from the devil. So he was like, I don't know what to say. And the Jewish guy that was with him told him that's wonderful. We will give you a place to stay. We'll provide food for you and your laundry. And Ron was like, he knew this was a supernatural event, and he's like, you'll get back to him. And he went and studied the Bible. If that is a possible scenario, if that may be. So here's his testimony. And we will propound this riddle very shortly.
For many years, the Bible captivated the interest of Ron Wyatt, and he had it in his heart to show people that the Bible is true, that the miracles really happened, and that there is a God who we have to have a relationship with. But his work was to meet great resistance from both fellow Christians as well as scientists who don't want to believe or relate to the living God. Among the many discoveries he made was Noah's Ark, where he was held captive by PKK terrorists in eastern Turkey. And the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah that God destroyed with fire and brimstone.
For the roof of the lower floor and for the floor of the upper floor.
He risked his own life and was imprisoned for 1 month in Saudi Arabia because he wanted to reveal to the world that at the real Mount Sinai there was archaeological evidence of the Israelites. He also showed where the Red Sea crossing took place, and Pharaoh's army drowned, and the several evidences under the sea that prove the story was true. He showed the possible place for the Israelite camp in Kadesh Barnea, where Moses struck the rock and the water gushed out. Here, it was obvious that water had once come pouring out of the stone foundation and drained down into the valley, yet nowhere in this vicinity is there any water supply. Most of those who knew Ron thought that what made the biggest impression on people was his genuine care for others and his humility. Almost 30 years ago, Ron Wyatt was walking over there between this wall and the Golgotha escarpment with an employee from the Israeli Antiquities Authority. Suddenly, he raised his hand near to Golgotha escarpment and he said, "That's Jeremiah's grotto and the Ark of the Covenant is in there." Both of them were very surprised by this statement, and Ron received verbal permission to dig there. Ron, who had his regular work beside his archaeological research, travelled home to decide as to whether or not to accept this task. Was the Ark of the Covenant really hidden there? And why, after so many years, did God want to unearth it again?
In 1978, while in Jerusalem, Ron Wyatt was walking outside the Old City near Calvary Escarpment when he met a man who worked with the Israeli Department of Antiquities. As they walked along discussing Roman antiquities, Ron had an experience that had never happened to him before. His left hand suddenly moved out from his side and pointed to a spot at the base of the escarpment wall. As this happened, he found himself saying, "That's Jeremiah's grotto, and the Ark of the Covenant is in there." Up until this point, Ron had never thought about finding the Ark of the Covenant. He had never researched the subject, much less thought about the possibility of excavating for it. As his mind was reeling, considering the possibility, he was astonished to hear his companion say, "That's wonderful. We'll not only furnish you the permit, we'll put you up in a place to stay, have your laundry done, and furnish your meals." But Ron was perplexed. The only reason he was in Jerusalem was because he had gotten severely sunburned while diving for chariot parts in the Red Sea, and had come back to wait his flight back home. He explained to the man from the Antiquities Department that he was due back at work, so he would have to go home and return later. That would give him time to do some research to figure out whether or not the Ark of the Covenant could even be in that location. Beginning that next year, Ron came back time and time again with his sons, Danny and Ronnie, and dug throughout the cave system under the Calvary Escarpment, having little idea where he was even supposed to look. As they excavated down the escarpment wall in the area where his hand had pointed, they uncovered 3 cutouts in the cliff face that were consistent with cutouts used by the Romans to hold signs, a rough equivalent to our billboard signs today. The signs detailed the crimes for which the criminals were being executed. Digging down further, they discovered the wall of a first-century building that they believed was a church, as it contained an altar. In front of that altar was a 14-inch square hole in the bedrock, with 3 other similar holes out in front of it. These were the type of holes used to hold crosses upright, a form of Roman execution. The single cross hole was filled with a stone plug and was unusual in that it had a large crack in it. Within the crack was a dark brown substance that looked like dried blood. However, Ron did not understand the significance of this at the time. Finally, in January of 1982, after digging in the cave system for 3 years, Ron discovered a tunnel that led into a chamber, which contained a gold table and several other articles which he believed to be from the first temple. Then, further back, he saw the top of a stone case that appeared to be the correct size to contain the Ark of the Covenant. In the ceiling of the chamber, directly above the left side of the stone case, Ron noticed a large crack. He also noticed that the top of the stone case was broken, creating an opening in the top of the case. And splashed around that opening in the top was the same brown substance that Ron had seen by the cross hole. Realizing what he had found, Ron, overwhelmed with emotion, passed out and lay in that chamber for 45 minutes. He knew what was in that case, but now what? He attempted to photograph it with a Polaroid camera, a 35mm camera, and video. In every case, the images were white out. Ron returned home to work until he could afford to return. In May, he borrowed a colonoscope and went back into the chamber. Drilling a small hole through the case, he was able to see enough to positively identify the contents of the stone case. It was the Ark of the Covenant.
On January 6th, 1982, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I broke into a chamber beneath the Calvary Escarpment, north of the city wall of Jerusalem. In that chamber is the Ark of the Covenant, the table of showbread, and several other things that I didn't see. They were covered with animal skins, with boards, and then with stones. We had excavated down that escarpment. We had found 3 cutouts in the wall like a recessed bookcase. We know from the valley north of Jerusalem that the ancient kings and rulers cut these things out in cliffs near populous areas or where a lot of people would be going by, and they put plaques of stone and whatever else in there bearing messages. We found the cutouts. We found the cross holes. If you read in the book of Matthew and the Gospels where it talks about Christ's death, it says the earth shook violently and the rocks were rent. Right to the left of the cross hole, at the base of where Christ died on the cross, the rock was rent. After Christ died, and the centurion stuck his spear into Christ's spleen, and the blood and water came out, it went down through that crack. It went on to the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant that God had arranged to be hidden in that chamber 600 years before Christ died.